And well, what I guess maybe just to do a little introduction to you. We were talking. Oh, it says that you told me that you've been living in Beijing for 5 years now.
That's right, I have.
But I didn't. I meant to ask you what inspired you to move there in the first place.
I came to China for the first time in 1994.
You talk right.
Is that? Can you hear me? Is that okay?
Of course.
In 1994, and with an exhibition of 8 people, and went back with some funding from the Australian government for 3 months in 96, and found that China puzzled me. I travel a lot, I do a lot of exhibitions overseas, but China was the puzzle I didn't get, and I needed to come back. So I kept coming back, and then finally stayed. So in 2007, I actually came over to do a project and didn't leave.
What about China felt like it was a puzzle?
I think for me, which we're all aware of, the relationship of change and China, there's 2 C's that correlate. China's going through this massive change that from 1994 to now, we speak of generations. Generations usually take 20 years. I think the China generation is a 6-year turnaround. So as an artist, and an artist dealing with the idea of states of collapse and change, it's a really wonderful place to be working because it's actually constantly in growth and collapse and growth and collapse. And the issues related to that, environmental issues particularly, which interest me, I'm at the coalface.
Yeah, would love to hear more about the way that your practice has changed since living there, and maybe a few examples of specific works that have come out of
China.
Yeah.
I guess I have a thought that any artist is of their own generation and their own country. I'm an Australian, and therefore the stuff I talk about is as an Australian voice, Australian eyes, Australian brain, Australian body. I am not interested in the Orientalism of living in another country. That is, making work that somehow or other has the exoticism of other. Really not at all. I'm living in China because the way that the land is functioning or dysfunctioning, the way that building and growth are occurring at such speed, feeds my thinking. It means that I'm actually like I'm in a living book. I'm in a living video. And from that, there's no way that I can just go, ignore this, Jayne, ignore this. There's so much material that is constant and going on about how waste is, what waste is, what's water, where's water, what's deforestation, what's the rare earth issue, that becomes so instrumental in thinking that cannot help for an artist dealing with the environment to feed you. It feeds me.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, I relate to that as someone who also lives in a country not of their birth or origin in some way. I mean, but just because you become aware of certain things that are fundamental to everything in the world, but because it's through this, lens where you see another society as an outsider, in a way it's a little bit more, everything looks strange.
I think
and
so.
Certain things become clear.
I think so. I think also in China it's far more intense.
Yes.
I mean, Australia, the same issues are occurring. We have, huge problems with water and salt and mineral resource, but not to the same effect. The effect in China is very great. So it makes it so that the information from that one can't ignore. It's also, I think, being in China is also, I mean, the name is the centre of the earth. In fact, because I do a lot of work around the world, it is actually a great base to be because I can very quickly be in other parts of the world for exhibitions and shows. And so, that combination of what I think is a great intellectual resource and also a great physical resource, draws me to China. And it's not somewhere that I know. It's not somewhere where I belong.
Yep. Has it changed the production of your artworks? Have you You're working with different materials and different...
Indeed. I think we all know that that if an artist wants to make large-scale work, and if an artist wants to do particular tests, it's going to, in the West, cost a lot of money for production. Still, Asia has production systems set up that allow for great testing, so that I can get steel works made, LED works made, works working with paper, with wood, whatever, and test. So it allows me to really think about practice and not always think that a major work has to be made without actually seeing the result. You know, quite often artists may do models and then, in fact, generate large work without seeing that stage between. It's also got still many wonderful craftspeople who have a traditional craft but understand that when you start to work with an artist that maybe things unravel and things, ravel back up again, and that's been very, very stimulating. So I can try a lot more. I can test a lot more.
But you yourself have a background in making things, always?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
In fact, downstairs in booth 1+1 with China Art Projects, you'll see a body of work called the City of Dreams. And in the City of Dreams, I call it the city that's how our urban life is in jeopardy because we are using up so much natural resources. This work actually is very handmade. Yeah. So I switch sometimes between the manufactured work, particularly for corporate projects and for some museum projects, but to the handmade work. Sometimes that use of the hand allows for chance and inversion and reflection, and the hand has its own frailty that manufacturing sometimes doesn't. Manufacturing can produce incredibly clean, schmick, smooth, which we love, but sometimes we love the unravel, the fractionally dirty, the nitty gritty dirt under the fingernails. So the show downstairs has a combination of both things.
Yeah, I think that's what you caught me the other day looking at that in kind of I was just drawn to the fact that there were kind of root-like structures in these very like natural forms which are growing in and beneath these architectural structures. And I just found myself trying to puzzle out that relationship between a kind of architectural model and a more natural form, and but I wanted to ask you about books because there are no books downstairs, but a lot of your projects in the past have taken books as a material. Maybe how did you start working with books, and then and just generally why is that a material that is fruitful for you?
I'm very interested in what a book is as a receptacle of knowledge. The book, whether it's a virtual book or an actual paper-bound book, is a receptacle of knowledge. It's also something which actually is about sort of a gathering. I'm very interested in the way people have libraries. Sometimes if you think of your own place, many people collect books but don't read them, and they sit there as this sort of body of existent and unperformed knowledge in a strange way. I'm also very interested, all my work is governed by what we're losing, a sense of loss. And so I will do things like manipulate books in various ways, have them falling, have them painted black, have them painted white, so that in the end it's about what we don't have, what we are missing, what we're not receiving, what we're overlooking. And books, because everyone knows them, we're so familiar with them, we assume they have authority, which they may or may not. A writer may have authority, a writer may not. To manipulate books suddenly raises bells with people. So straight away they become quite potent as political works just by using a book.
In Taipei you had this, there's a community project called Memory Space.
Yes, indeed.
Could you describe a little bit about this?
People might be aware of a particular organisation that's called the Urban Renewal Scheme, and it's across the world. And countries throughout the world participate in what is called URS, Urban Renewal Scheme. And Taiwan had their year last year. and the government supports it. It's funded. It's usually a large collaborative project which works with architects, designers, landscape designers, environmentalists, engineers, artists, musicians, you name it. And people are come together to work to look at what might be the issues of that particular country. Why me in Taiwan? It was a lot of Taiwanese, individuals were engaged, but I do a lot of work in Taiwan, many projects. So I was invited for that. It's like the token non-Taiwanese. No, not quite. There was quite a few other countries invited. What we were doing is looking specifically at Taipei and looking at specifically at what were the changes that had occurred in Taipei over the last 10 years, as in any city. And what became the issues that we were really focusing on is how communities function. Within cities, there are always communities. In the street, in a park, in a school, in various places, coffee shops. In Taiwan, as in fact in old Hong Kong and still in parts of Hong Kong, the alleyways. And the alleyways are the place that people would often sit and wash and cook and talk, play with their children, store their bicycles and so on. And it was a very reassuring place, which is really very fast disappearing. So what we did is recreate aspects of those alleyways to alert people to what was being lost on a very basic communal level. And there was wonderful structures in this that were built, architectural structures, and wonderful artworks, and systems of eating, and systems of cooking, and systems of riding. And I made two works, one which was actually a tower of recycled material, which was 6 metres high, to alert us again to these things which are part of the everyday, but now part of waste. You need to see it.
Is it still? How long is it going to be there?
It was temporary. It was the most amazing stuff was built, and it stayed up for 4 months, and then it was totally repacked. The whole thing went back to be reused for building materials, for using for paper, for using just totally recycled. So it was amazing.
Any sense of how the project impacted the